Welcome to the Member Engagement Show, the podcast for association professionals, brought to you by Higher Logic. I'm your host, Kelly Whelan, and in each episode, we'll talk to guests whose expertise will help you gain new members, boost retention, and deepen member involvement, all goals that can transform your organization. I invite you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and visit us at higherlogic.com/podcasts to catch the best of past episodes. Now, let's start the show.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Member Engagement Show. Today, I'm joined by Higher Logic's Chief Technology Officer, Conor Sibley. Conor has spent the last 2 decades building influential companies where he designed and managed internet scale platforms. He has in-depth knowledge of emerging technologies and is part of the team leading the development of Higher Logic's AI toolset. I'm really excited to have him with me today to talk about the ways that AI applications for associations are evolving, and he's also going to highlight some of the new AI tools from Higher Logic. So welcome, Conor.
How you doing? I just realized is that I'm creeping up on 3 decades. It's making me feel really old.
I know the last couple of years, Higher Logic and many other sources have talked a lot about AI. And so at this stage, I'd love to hear from you some of the most exciting applications and use cases that you can think of for AI in associations.
Sure. So what's kind of interesting is that when people end up talking about AI, there's the zeitgeist. And so everybody ends up like thinking that AI means ChatGPT, right? And ChatGPT is basically a generative kind of AI. There's tons of other different kinds of AIs that people can end up bringing to bear. And I think it's really important to note that people have been using AI for a really long time in a number of different enterprise use cases. Something that I think is really interesting and that a lot of associations should be paying attention to related to AI is that, you log into a platform like Netflix, you log into a platform like, Amazon, and those platforms know a ton about you. And because they know a ton about you, they offer these like highly personalized experiences. And those highly personalized experiences are things that you start to expect as a consumer. And so those highly personalized experiences, should we be as like a technology vendor helping associations provide more highly tailored experiences to their members? I think so. So, how do you end up doing that? One of the ways you end up doing that is by gaining a ton of information about the members, what they like, who they are, what kind of content, what kind of things they like to interact with, what kind of events they like to go to, what kind of emails they like to engage with. And all those topics, you end up putting them all together. And you now, as an association, know a ton about your members. You can segment them, and then you can provide great tailored experiences directly to their inboxes, to their mobile phones, and then invent live experiences as well. So personalization is is a key place where I think that associations can leverage AI. Another way that people can end up leveraging AI is by utilizing generative AI, and I think that there's a lot of really cool use cases around generative AI around marketing. So we've built a number of really cool tools recently that will allow associations to utilize our marketing automation platforms to send out emails faster. And so, why is it important to send out emails faster? I mean, so there's a couple things that are kind of cool about generative AI and the toolkits that we've got. What we've seen historically related to marketing automation is that people get stuck when they're, creating content that are going to be sent to people. Like me, when I'm creating a blog post or I'm sending an email, the most time that I spend actually is when I'm just sitting there in front of the editor going, well, what am I going to write? But once I've got content sitting in front of me, like if someone gives me an outline or if I've written up an outline myself, I have a much easier time filling in that content or even editing it. And so something that I think is really cool is that generative AI tools will help you to outline. So really good at utilizing generative AI to brainstorm. So you can just basically talk with AIs. And so something that I think is really cool is I don't know how many people out there saw the announcements from OpenAI recently about GPT-4o, but it's basically gotten to the point where you can have a conversation with these AIs. And I think what people should really think about doing is basically brainstorming with it. So just have a conversation back and forth about what you're trying to accomplish. based on that conversation, now you've got some content. Well, what you could do is you could take that content, you can put it into a marketing automation platform, or leverage the stuff that we've just recently done, which will allow you to basically brainstorm within the tool itself, and then create the content, and then like basically save yourself a ton of time, get better resonating content with your members, create content faster, send better emails, get better engagement, like all that kind of stuff. So those are two areas, basically generating content and personalization, I think are really cool related to AI.
I love that you've called out. I think for me, I agree, having worked in an association and also in my work now with Higher Logic, having that AI ability, using it to kind of create an initial draft that I can react to or kind of riff off of what the AI is coming up with is super cool. And I love that Higher Logic's AI assistant, which will now be in the marketing automation tools, is kind of taking that I would have previously done externally and putting it right in where you're building the email. So it just makes it so much faster than to go ahead and kind of ask it for a draft really quick while you're drafting an email about an upcoming event or your member benefits or your kind of member onboarding sequence. And it's going to give you something to react to and edit like right there in the editor so that you don't have to kind of go to something external, which is awesome.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the cool thing is that related to personalization, just over time, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to provide more and more what's called in the AI world context. So we're going to be able to provide more and more context to these models in the form of what content the audience of the message that you're sending, what content they've in the past interacted with. And so if you know that like there's a particular tone or style that resonates with somebody, I mean, if you think about like how you would interact with a marketing consultant or like some kind of marketing expert, that marketing expert would ask you like, what has resonated with people in the past, and then they would look at like the tone and the style and the length of the message, and they glean all sorts of interesting information about that. And they'd be like, well, if it worked in the past for this segment of people, we should probably end up creating content that looks like it. Well, AI is really good at that. And so the more context that we can provide the model, and that's stuff that we're going to be able to do in the background for people, the better that the messages that you're sending out are going to resonate with people. And so if you think about like the different portions of the email that like will resonate with people, there's like the title. I mean, that's what when we're scrolling through our phones or looking through our inboxes, that's what causes people to open stuff. And so, what you could do is you can even ask the agent to like make my title more snappy, make it more clickbaity. Like you can ask it to do things like that will increase the likelihood that someone will open your message. And so if you think about like the workflow that you could do, what you could do is you could brainstorm with an agent about the content that you want to put in the email. And you're like, this is like really strong, powerful content that I want to put into this message, get all that content in the message. And then this is something that I think is really cool about, generative AIs, is that you can then take that content and then say, give me a summary. So there's this concept of like, something called summarization that, GPTs are really, really, really good at. And so what you could do then is you could say, give me a summary in the form of an email title that's snappy, that will like highly engage with. And then you could say the type of the member, like in what voice. There's something called like style transform. And so, you could even say, rewrite the email as a pirate. And so that like that voice that that you use, you could say, make it so that this is like a fun title, make it so that it's something that sounds more scientific-y, make it so that it sounds more professionally. And so you can change the voice of the content in the email or even the gist of the title. And so if you start kind of breaking up your workflow, what I would suggest is if when people are creating content related to emails, they first brainstorm, get an outline put together, get the AI to help you create the sections, then go through, edit everything, and then have it help you create the title. And then the last thing, which I think is like really cool, and something that's related to the latest GPTs, is that like if people have heard of those three little letters like LLM, large language model, there's now MLLMs, like multimodal. And like what's a mode? Well, one of the modes is text, right? So a large language model is just text. But like a multimodal large language model, you can have text. Some of them will end up doing audio, so you can speak back and forth to it. And then now some of them are doing pictures or even video. And so what you can do is you can get some of these some of these, GPTs then to not just help you create the content, but help you create images. And when you start thinking about what is it that causes you when you're a user, when you're looking at your inbox, to when you click through something and decide whether to read it, you're going to engage with stuff way more if there's pictures in your content. So you can even get the models to help you create the titles, to create the outlines, to help you write the message, and then put images in there. That's really cool to me.
Yeah, it just expedites things a lot, which I think is so helpful when you work at an association. A lot of them, at least in my experience, you have like a small staff. So you're doing a bunch of stuff. And like I was personally drafting like multiple emails a week. So having that tool to help me either start with the brainstorming or refine what I was making would have been incredibly powerful and saved me a lot of time, and just makes it possible for you to achieve more in your role at an association. So it's definitely super exciting. And I do love also, like you called out, that you have that opportunity to optimize your subject lines, to optimize your body text, to optimize your calls to action. So like what your buttons say, and that AI assistant model in HireLogic's tools is then helping you could ask it like, rephrase this in a way that will work better for this member segment or something to that effect, and get some edits that can make your email just that much more powerful. I remember too, Amber Worthen was on the show a couple episodes back, and she shared an example where she asks the AI, call out any questions you think a reader would have after reading this email. And sometimes that kind of flags for
that's
her
cool.
too. Yeah, she was saying that flags for her, like, did I miss something that my members might not realize, because I work for the association. I know the answer to this question, but they might not have realized that question. And so then the AI highlights that for her so she can make sure that's incorporated in her messaging. So that's really awesome as well.
Yeah. So something that's really cool that I've heard that, some people have done recently related to like legal arguments. They've been able to take like a legal argument from one side and a legal argument from other, and then ask the model which one wins in different situations, right? You can also end up like uploading a corpus of text, or, as a person that's doing a lot of like, software stuff, you can load a chunk of code, and then you can say, tell me any problems with this code. Tell me like, what kind of errors could result, and then make it better. So there's all sorts of like awesome things about putting things into these systems and then asking them to make it better. We're just figuring out what the capabilities of some of these things. It's really cool.
Yeah. And I feel like different people often find all different use cases for it, which is very awesome too. Like there's things that I naturally think of in the work that I do, or where I need help, that I'm going to put into the AI, that then someone else is doing something totally different. And then I hear, oh yeah, someone did XYZ thing. I'm like, that sounds really awesome. That kind of reminds me too. So you did a session, or a panel rather, with Reggie Henry from ASAE and who am I forgetting from IBM?
Marius? Yeah.
Marius, from IBM, where you all were talking about some of the really awesome applications of AI for associations. And I think one of the things that struck me was this idea of kind of creating repositories of data and information, or knowledge bases from the existing content that your association has, where you can then apply an AI agent to where then when someone asks a question, like that repository or that knowledge base through the AI can answer those questions. Could you like elaborate on that a little bit for listeners?
Yeah. So right now we're trying to figure out what kind of functionality people in the association space want related to, generative AI, chatbots, that kind of stuff. And what I'm struggling with is, if you ended up giving a generative AI access to your members, and your members can communicate with it, there's this concept of something called like, hallucination. And, what does hallucination mean? Well, it basically means that the results of the questions that you give to the model are non-deterministic. So you ask the question on day one, you end up getting answer one. You ask a question on day two, you get answer two. So you've got basically a lot of variety in the answers, just independent of the question. So, associations may feel like they want to control the conversation with the members. So they're like, well, that's a little bit dangerous. What we're thinking is there's a need to have like a human in the loop anytime that, an AI ends up generating content. So, how would that work out? Well, I think a lot of associations right now, if they've got like an advocacy team, and the advocacy team gets like questions from their members, or, so there's some new some new paper that's kicked out by Congress or some legislation, people end up reaching out to the associations to try to figure out what are the ramifications of this. And that massive document could be hundreds and hundreds of pages long, and people want summaries of those documents, and they want to know based upon certain scenarios that would impact them, what's relevant to them. So they end up asking these questions, and so these association team members are inundated with questions from members. Well, what's AI really good at? I mean, we just talked about it. It's really good at taking large corpuses of text, summarizing it, and then also something that's a burgeoning field inside of the AI space, something called results augmented generation. What you can do is you can take large corpuses of content and put it into a search index, and then you can ask questions basically of that search bot, that search platform that's searching over that content. So you could take those congressional proceedings or those any documents that you had, you could upload it into a platform, and then you could provide that platform a chatbot to your staff, so your staff could save an enormous amount of time answering people's questions. And so something that's really important related to results augmented generation is that when something gets summarized, you want to be able to get the attribution of the content to understand whether or not the model ended up hallucinating something. So what you want to do is you want your staff to save a ton of time by asking a question of the chatbot, getting an answer, and being like, okay, does this pass the sniff test? And then once it passes the sniff test, look at the content that the AI bot was referencing, look through it and be like, is this true? Does this actually make sense? And then you can end up editing that piece of content and then sending it back to the member, answering their question. So basically what I'm advocating for is human in the loop AI. How can we end up saving massive amounts of time for associations by utilizing AI to do the things that it's really good at, searching based upon semantic meaning of content, and then summarizing in a voice that's readable, and then creating that content and then being able to send that back to members, or even post things like newsletters that summarize things that are potentially highly technical or esoteric that are in your field of purview. You could do all sorts of interesting stuff. You could take your journal, you could put your journal behind a rag, and whenever your journal comes out, there may be something that would be of interest, but it's super deep, some medical topic. It's super deep. What you could do is you could ask the LLM to create an overview that would go well on Mashable. And then you could take that and you could post that up as basically clickbait for non-members, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can picture a ton of applications with that. And I think there's multiple things about it that attract me as someone, again, who's worked in associations, and I'm literally picturing situations where I would have used this. One of the things I like the most about this application of AI is that you're using vetted content that you already know is good. It's not like ChatGPT where it's just pulling from the entire internet. If you're deciding what the AI is going to pull from, and you're saying, okay, it's going to pull from this white paper that we wrote, or it's going to pull from this government document like you used as an example, then at least the source is a good source. It's not just some Joe Schmo on the internet that doesn't know anything about your association's kind of purview. I love that about it. And then I just think there's so many examples of ways that an association could use that. You could use it to maybe take a series of content that you have about a particular topic that your association members in their professional work, they need to kind of know how to do it. So I'm thinking the association I most recently worked with was research ethics. So there were a lot of specific things that people had to do when reviewing research studies. And there were specific regulations around how someone needed to review that research. You could probably take the research ethics guidelines and put them in this so that someone could literally, if a member asked a question about, does the research guidelines cover this, it could return an answer to your staff that says no, it doesn't cover that, or yes, it does. And here's the section of the guidelines that this pertains to. And then, like you said, you have your internal staff vet that, make sure that's correct before you send it back to a member. And now you've saved so much time, because instead of going through, I think those regulation documents were hundreds of pages long. So instead of your staff going back through all of that to give someone an answer, again, bouncing exactly off of what you said, you get a quick answer back. It references where it was pulling that information from, and then you're able to give a quicker answer to your members. I think you could also do it with your own internal stuff. Like if you have certain policies internally or HR things or support tickets or questions that everyone is always asking your association, let's say, like at my association, there were different departments. So there's the education department and the membership department and the conference department and the marketing department. And then there's the person that actually is like on answering the phones. And so all of those people have their certain areas of expertise that they might need to be able to answer questions for the members. If someone says, how do I renew my membership? Well, if the event department gets that question, they might not know how a person renews their membership. Whereas a membership person, if they get a question about the conference, they might not know the answer to that. You could use the AI internally too to be like, we're all keeping this repository of answers to common questions. And now the AI can pull it out without having someone go through this like multi-page internal document that's like frequently asked questions.
Yeah, no, that's so important to bring up. Like in any organization, if there's only one person, then there's only one silo of knowledge. But the minute that you start to have departments, you start to have information that gets siloed in a department. Now imagine if you ended up taking all of that information in the form of documents and policies and any of the stuff that we were just talking about, and you ended up feeding it into a RAG-based chatbot. Now you don't end up having to wait to get your answers. The reason why like smaller organizations end up startups end up innovating and then like growing faster than large enterprises is because of information flow within like larger organizations. There's decision making and information flow. And when you have to sit there and you have to wait to get an answer back from someone in a different department, that annoys staff. But like imagine if you've got a member who's asking a question and then someone's fielding the initial answer and then you have to ask a bunch of people within your organization. It's going to take a really long time to get back that answer. And if it takes a long time to get back the answer, you get a member that's like, meh, kind of annoyed. I was really interested in hearing that yesterday, but it's 2 days later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think unfortunately, like even though we in associations understand, like, yes, there's different departments and they each have their areas of expertise, the member might feel like, do you not even know anything about your association? Like you can't answer this, what they think is a very basic question. And they're not realizing like, yes, it's a basic question, but like, especially in a remote environment where I can't just walk over to I can't walk over to Connor's desk and say, Connor, how does our AI assistant work? And I have to wait because maybe you're on a different time zone. So I think especially in a remote environment, getting those answers quickly. And I know like my association, we kept a document of frequently asked questions, but sometimes I would still get questions from other folks because they're scrolling through that like 50-page document looking for the answer and they run right over it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so this is something that I've been messing around with recently. I took our internal staff portal, and I took all the content from our internal staff portal and then I put it into a knowledge base and then made it so that the AI engine, it was exposed to an AI engine. I took like our product documentation, put it into the AI engine, and a bunch of other different internal documents, and then I made it so that the AI engine, the chatbot, was exposed via Slack. And I'm actually working right now on a Teams bot as well. But I think that there's incredible productivity gains that we can get by allowing people to self-service their way into finding out like answers to questions. Like I think that's like so cool. And if we can take some of these concepts and we can expose it to people and help associations like run and operate faster, get more engagement with their members. I mean, that's all the stuff that we're trying to help with, right? Get people to run faster, which causes better member engagement, which just like helps the whole industry. I mean, that's something that I think is really cool, really awesome, like utilization of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's certain instances too where you might be like, we've talked a lot about how having that person in there with the AI to check it. So having that database kind of internally that someone asks the AI a question, it gives them the answer, they vet it before they send it to members. But I think there's maybe some like careful use cases too, where you could make an AI chatbot available directly to your members, like again, within your community, where if they say, hey, do you have a resource for, I'll just use my association as an example again, like, do you have a resource for research ethics review of studies, including pregnant women? because that was something, there's specific regulations around pregnant women and research ethics reviews. And we did have resources. We had like webinars, we had resources from some of our like experts in the field. We had session recordings. And so someone could have searched our whole website for those things, but maybe you build something into your community so that if someone asks that question, they can then be directed to those things that are tagged as such, tagged like these are resources for research ethics review with pregnant women, and they just get that back. And they're not having to like search. I get that some people want to like browse your whole catalog, and I don't think that'll change. There will still be people who want to browse the whole catalog, but there are also people that they want an answer now. They're like, I need a resource about this. I want it now. And like you said, to member engagement, if you can give them that answer right now, you've just exponentially increased your association's value to that person.
What you're talking about is that there's multiple different ways that members interact with associations. One of them is to learn things, and another one is to get answers. And if someone's like, there's a completely different like utilization and browsing behavior that someone has when they're like, time constrained and they're like, I just need to know this now, versus I want to go to some place to be able to learn. And overwhelmingly, one or those other like, information architectures are what people end up designing a system with. And so you're either leaving one, like the learner or the question answer person out in the cold. And AI is an awesome way to like help with the people that are just looking for an answer.
I want to change tracks a little bit because I know you and I had a previous conversation that was super interesting about kind of how AI will help align like search capabilities a little bit better to meaning as opposed to just like specific words. Could you talk a little bit more about that concept and how that will kind of evolve?
Yeah, I'm going to need to get a whiteboard and start drawing. Yeah. So in the past, I think everybody that's ever used Google knows that like the way that you get the best results is by using like long tail search terms. And there's a number of different reasons why that's the case.
Sorry to cut you off, but can you just define like a long tail search term for folks in case they're not familiar? Like that's when you're asking literally a question. How do I do?
Yeah. So when you're using like, a legacy based, and, some of these like search platforms are getting considerably better at like, understanding what it is that you're trying to search for, because they're looking at, and we'll define like, semantic meaning in a second. But like traditionally search engines, basically, if you typed in CAT, it would just look for documents with CAT in it. And the reason that is like, what you do is like, if you're a search engine, you've got like a crawler that reaches out to someone's web page. They pull in all of the text from the web page, and then they put that text into a database, and then they break up all of that text into the component words. And then now that database, you then end up, when you type in something, it's reaching into that database and it's saying, are there any matches for CAT? And then it pulls back up that document. That document then has like a metadata in it that's like a link back to that website. And then you see those links on the search platform. So imagine if you went to a search platform and you typed in CAT and there were lots of documents with CAT in it. You're like, man, this is great. But imagine if you were a veterinary association or someone that ended up having, a lot of documents that had CAT in it, feline, kitten, all of those things, cat, feline, they're all very similar. And we as humans know that they're very similar. And so if we ended up like searching for CAT and we didn't get back anything related to kittens and felines, we'd be like, that was a kind of a poor, search experience. And why is it? It's because the search platforms of they were just matching on the lexical form, like CAT. They weren't matching on the semantic meaning of cat. So imagine if we ended up changing up that paradigm using AI, where there was like a pre-processing step. So when we reached out and crawled that website, we took all the content from that website, and instead of putting it in as CAT into the database, we marked it up as this thing called a embedding. An embedding is basically just like if anybody remembers from math, like y equals mx plus c, those like angles and dots and vectors and stuff. It's basically just like a numerical representation of cat. And because it's a numerical representation of cat and feline will actually show up if you end up charting them in a group on that chart that's very close together. Dog would be a little bit, further apart from cat. Elephant would be a little further apart. Car would be pretty far away. And so that semantic meaning around that, if you ended up searching for cat, you wouldn't just get back CAT, you'd get back the things that were similar to it, similar to the semantic meaning. This is actually like a key thing for people to understand related to AI and why like search experiences are getting way, way, way better. The same way that like a GPT, when you end up talking to it, how it understands what you're asking it, what it's doing is it's parsing up that word into its component, like in a semantic form, and then it's responding to you. If we end up doing that same thing with our search platforms, we're going to make search experiences exponentially better for our members because we don't have to have them type in these exact and brought up like long tail terms. We don't have to have somebody type in cat, feline, kitten, all of those different terms together to be able to get back all of the results that they would expect. We can just have them type in what it is that they're looking for. And then the systems can be like, okay, I understand the meaning of what you're looking for. And if you end up giving it additional context about who you are, I can give you back information based upon whether you're looking for medical information or like, basically your level of understanding related to the topic. And so this is the direction that like, search is going to be, going in the future. And I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot too, because it's sort of something that hopefully will improve things for associations even without necessarily having to like do anything. I get that there's like a lot of challenges that associations run into when there is new technology of like finding the time to implement new strategies. And I do think that's worth doing when it comes to AI. But additionally, like this, if search engines and such are implementing this better way of searching, that will help your association too, because you'll have the meaning of what a member might be like looking something up online. And instead of having to worry about, do I have the right keywords in my content so that the search engine can find this content? Hopefully it's finding it because you're using a series of words that are all relevant to what your members are searching for.
And so something else that's really cool is that there's these, what are called like, embedding transformers. There's embedding transformers that are English only, and then there's embedding transformers that are multi-language. There's a ton of different associations, and we service a lot of customers inside of Canada where they've got to produce content in English and French. Imagine if you're a French speaker and you end up going to a site and you type in the meaning of something and you get back no content, and then you end up switching over and then typing the same thing in English, and then you get a bunch of content. You're going to be like, oh man, this organization isn't taking care of me. If you use a transformer related to search that's multilingual, when someone searches for, I don't know what cat is in French. Do you have any idea?
I don't.
but if they search for cat and you've marked up all of your content with a multi-language capable transformer, you're going to get back all of the results from the platform, whether it's like English or French. And then if you were a native French speaker, you could just click on like translate the document if it was like natively English. Or, and this is what's really cool about like, sequence to sequence transformers, as they've gotten like ton better, I bet you within like a couple of years, a lot of organizations are going to be having on their website and any of their public content, easy ways to just click on a button and have it show you the content in whatever language it is that the person speaks. I think that's like awesome from like an accessibility and a bunch of other different perspectives around like, being able to disseminate information to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought that up because I remember talking to one of our customers, the Canadian Food Innovation Network, that kind of is starting to do something like that with relation to using AI to create a more seamless multilingual site in Canada, but that this like semantic meaning application will make that even better, that it won't just be like translating so that you have like two versions of the page. It will also mean that when people are searching, whether they search cat in English or cat in French, they will still get your content because the search engine understands that cat is the same concept in English and French and German and Spanish and everything. So that's exactly just super cool.
I mean, it's gonna increase engagement and make it so that the content that you're publishing is accessible to so many more people.
Yeah, and that I think too will just be, I know Canadian associations, like you mentioned, sometimes have specific regulations around providing their web content, their marketing content in both languages, in English and French. But I think there's associations around the world that will have a bigger reach if their content can be effectively and
Consume, yeah.
meaningfully like multilingual so that someone can consume it anywhere without having to like manually translate it.
And what's really interesting is that there's a lot of like, historical translation models that were like Parisian French. And so there was a really interesting conversation about AI recently in these, like the advent of these really good sequence to sequence transformers where you can say, translate this not just in French, but translate it in Quebec, I think. Quebecois,
Yeah.
I don't know French.
Yeah.
Because there's slightly different language.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
the same. It's the same in Spanish. I have actually family members that I do not personally know. They passed away before I had the opportunity to meet them, but I've heard stories in my family of how my grandfather and his sister, he lived in the United States, she still lived in Spain. They used to get in arguments about the Spanish that he would use from like changing up what he was using, or if he was using Spanish that was more like Mexican influence versus
Yeah.
her using Spanish that was mostly from Spain, and they would get in arguments about it, even though
Yeah.
they were both like speaking Spanish. So definitely a lot of regionality there that could be accommodated.
Yeah, well, I mean, just think about it from a personalization perspective. So back to the original stuff that we were talking about. If a member comes to your site and they don't feel like you know them, they are less likely to engage and renew their membership, engage with your content, come to your events, like, all that kind of stuff. The more that someone feels like you know them and you're creating content for them and you're servicing them, the flywheel like happens, like more engagement, more content, better services, more money to create additional content, like that kind of stuff. So I think that this is actually the multilingual capabilities alone is like something that's really cool.
Well, before we kind of run out of time here, I do want to again change tracks a little and talk a little bit about Higher Logic's tools that are going to be available. I know we're working on future items too, and we're really committed to helping associations succeed with that latest technologies. Can you tell listeners a little bit about the new tools that are available now? So that's like bulk upload and suggested tags, I know, are going to be available. AI assistant, we talked a little bit about in the marketing platforms, and then smart newsletter as well in the community platform.
Yeah, so we can start with the bulk upload. Associations are great at creating content, and we just talked about some of these like content silos. If you want to take that content and you want to expose it to our search engine, which is just going to be getting better and better over time. We're going to be adding some of these like semantic search capabilities shortly. You're going to want to have that inside of a search platform that's capable of like understanding the semantic queries that people like, the intention of their queries. How are you going to get that content into our platform? Well, I know if anybody's out there like looking at like all of the content that they've gotten and thinking about going someplace and then clicking on buttons and uploading them one at a time, they're like, nah, kill me. I'm already like, resource constrained and time constrained. I don't want to do that. So what we've done is we've created a capability that will allow people to take massive corpuses of documents, everything from like, videos and files and PDFs and, that kind of stuff, and then uploading it into the platform. And so now all of a sudden, all that content is accessible inside of the community. Good. Now, the second thing is we're taking that content and we're running it through AI platforms. So there's a strong possibility that associations have these like tagging schemes, and there's probably even like a working group that a lot of these organizations have that have created tag ontologies. Everybody knows how much of a pain in the neck it is to go through and click on a document and then choose all of the relevant tags so that the content is categorized correctly and people can find it better. And so a lot of people do not do that. They spend all this effort creating these like tag ontologies, and they've got tons of content that's not tagged. This is another thing that AIs are really good at. We're able to feed the tag ontology into the AI and then say, based upon this tag ontology, which tags apply to this piece of content. And so instead of having to reach out to your members or have staff spend massive amounts of time tagging this, upload it to our platform, click on the box that says tag this content for me, make sure you got your tag ontology in place, come back a couple hours later, saved you massive
It's
amounts of
done.
time. Done, done, done. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
that just
think that
makes
kind of stuff's cool.
your community resource library like so much more powerful. That's so cool. It seems like such a simple thing, but just the amount of time I already picture it saving is amazing.
Well, yeah. I mean, all that stuff. Like, it seems so simple. Technology, like the details. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to hide all of the complexity from people. Just make it easier. Help people engage. Help members engage more with associations, and then we win. Our customers and partners win. That's kind of stuff that we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So then AI assistant too, this one might be the one folks are like a little more familiar with what this looks like. So essentially that'll be a chat bot within
hmm
the marketing platforms that allows people to, like we were talking about earlier, where we shared some examples of kind of brainstorming email content for your emails and then getting responses back from the bot that you can just directly put into your emails right when you're building them.
Yeah, and so the cool thing is that a lot of associations probably have policies, and those policies, some of them may say that you can't, as a staff member, take the output of any content that comes from ChatGPT or Claude or Google or Bing or any of those things, right? Well, what we've done is we've made it so that we've got a private enclave that doesn't get trained on your data. We've worked with Microsoft to ensure that any of the information that we're helping to generate or any of the content that is being used to help give context to the model so that we can give you better results. None of that stuff is leaching out of your environment. You're not at risk of that content showing up inside of a future model. And then your organizational gold, your data, isn't being co-opted by these Googles and Bings and OpenAIs, right? So we've made it so that we've exposed tools that will end up saving you time in a safe fashion inside of the platform. And that's, I think, pretty cool. And I hope people realize how cool that is.
I definitely think that would have been super helpful for me when email was a huge part of my job at my association, and it would have been really nice, even if you can use ChatGPT, even if you don't have regulations in your policies in your association that prevent you from using a public tool. It's just nice to have the tool in
Yeah.
in the email platform while you're doing it, as opposed to having I
Yeah.
always have at least six tabs open, but
Yeah.
so that's
Same.
awesome too. And then smart newsletter, I know that we have had smart newsletter for a while, but I think with the AI tools, it's just becoming all that much better. And it's another kind of machine learning AI tool that really helps people drive that member engagement like we were talking about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So what we're doing is we're figuring out what content people have engaged with in the past. And then based upon what content they've engaged with in the past, they're likely to engage with this other piece of content. So, we put people into lookalike models. And so this is part of that personalization experience. The more people engage with the content in your platform, the more likely it is that they're going to get more stuff that they like. And so we're helping to provide a personalized experience through some of these tools, and we want to provide more and more of those kind of capabilities inside of the platform moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I love watching it all come together and being able to talk about it on the podcast like we are now and in our content. It's just a super exciting thing to be able to share with association folks, just knowing how impactful it's going to be.
Awesome.
Conor, is there anything else that you'd want to leave people with for the episode or anything that's top of mind?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to inundate. This is like a fire hose of information.
Yeah.
if anybody wants to reach out and talk about anything AI related, whether it's something that your organizations are struggling with or cool ideas, it's been awesome. The number of people who reached out to me recently, and some of the new cool tools that we're going to be helping to provide associations to be able to get more done faster, service their members better, or because people hit me up and I'm like, man, that's really cool. And we just hack on stuff. My hope is that if we end up doing another one of these, probably within the next couple of weeks, I'll have some cool functionality that I could even demo for you guys.
Absolutely. Well, for our listeners, too, I want to highlight we do have a webinar coming up on June 11th, which is a webinar where we will show HireLogic's new AI tools in action. So that's June 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And if you attend that webinar, you will be one of the first to get access to the AI tools. So webinar attendees are going to be the folks that have first access to the AI tools that Conor and I were talking about today. So I encourage folks to register for that. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. And otherwise, I hope you'll stay tuned for everything that's coming out from Higher Logic. We'll keep you posted on all the cool new AI stuff we're able to provide to help associations succeed.
I hope everybody has a good day and back to meetings.
Yeah.